Hey guys, Glacial here. And when it comes to making consoles, nobody's been doing it quite as long as Nintendo. So today I wanted to take a look at their first ever home console. Now the first home console they ever made was one of these things, and I don't have any of those lying around, so we're going to have a look at the NES instead. Now the NES was a very big deal. The only competition it really had at the time was the Atari 7800 and the Sega Master System. Now, while they were both fine enough consoles, they did not stand a chance against Nintendo's 8-bit titan. The NES remains popular for about 10 years after its release, even after the Super Nintendo came out. The NES is widely regarded as the most important system of all time, as it single-handedly saved the video game industry after the infamous crash of 1983. Before the NES, Nintendo tried their hand at several arcade games. The first of these was a game called Radar Scope, but it was a complete failure and almost bankrupted Nintendo. But then they made Donkey Kong, and we all know how that turned out. In 1983 in Japan, Nintendo released the Famicom. It was pretty successful for its first few years in Japan, so in 1985 they set out to make one last great game for the system before it died out. That was a little known release called Super Mario Bros. And yeah, this game was kind of successful. After the immense success of Mario Bros, they tried to get the Famicom launched in North America in 1985. Though at this time, video games were still in a rough spot thanks to the crash. So in order to get it released in stores, they marketed it as a toy rather than a games console, as well as renaming it to the Nintendo Entertainment System and designing it to look more like a VCR, which were very popular at the time. Another selling point that they heavily advertised was Rob the Robot. Well, looking back on it now, Rob isn't a very good accessory. It's loud, slow, and only worked with 2 games, but advertising and his design helped sell hundreds of NES in its first few years. The system itself was sold in various bundles over its lifetime. The original bundle was the most iconic. The deluxe set came with the console, 2 controllers, Zapper, Rob, Super Mario Bros, Duck Hunt and Gyromite. Well, this is the bundle that first comes to mind when thinking of the NES, and it included the most features. There was also the challenge set, which came with 2 controllers and Super Mario Bros 3. The sports set included 4 controllers, the wireless satellite adapter, batteries and the Sensational Sports Twin Pack. Or the power set, which came with the power pad, Zapper, and the Duck Hunt / Super Mario Bros / World Class Track Meet combo cart. Now, let's have a look at the console itself. It looks much different than anything we're familiar with today, and it even looks wildly different than its competitors at the time. It has a 2-toned grey colour scheme, though mine has yellowed over time. Unlike other cartridge-based consoles, the NES is not a top loader, and it has no visible cartridge slot. Instead of this, the NES has a door on the front of the system which when open will reveal the cartridge slot. This helped it further resemble a VCR, which would appeal better to consumers at the time. Though this feature hasn't aged all that well, I often find that games will get stuck in there or not go in at all. But compare this to the Japanese Famicom, that was a top loader and has no issues whatsoever with taking cartridges. But I have to admit, I do really like it. The front of the console also has 2 controller ports, the power and reset buttons. Some games could actually use 4 controllers with the use of add-ons like the Fourscore or the Satellite. In terms of hookups, the NES has an advantage over the Famicom, as the Famicom only had one type of video output, RF. RF is fuzzy and doesn't look all that good, while the NES gave you the option for both RF as well as AV, which looks a lot better in comparison. Though unfortunately I don't have AV cables for my NES, so I have to stick with the lesser video type. These controllers are really something though. I've seen several people that really don't like these things. The corners can dig into your hands after a long play session, but I've never really had that be an issue. It is a classic design though. If I were to think of controllers, this would be one of the first ones that comes to mind. It's such a recognisable design. The D-pad is great, sturdy and effective. 2 main buttons for actions, and start and select buttons for menus and pausing. It is so good in fact that several other controllers tried to copy it, to varying results. And in 2016, Nintendo released the NES Classic. I don't have that much to say about it, but it's such a cute little thing. It has 30 of the best NES games just preloaded onto it, It plugs right into the TV and you can play them all right from the start. Though I feel like it's missing a few great ones like Tetris, DuckTales, Mega Man 3-6 or Castlevania 3. The cartridges used for the NES are great. I've always just loved the way these things looked. I don't know why, but I always just have. In terms of quality, these are amazing. Other cartridge-based consoles tend to have their cartridges wear down over time, or just be generally unstable. If you have an NES game that doesn't work, it's most likely the fault of the console, and if it's the cartridge that's causing the issue, a small amount of rubbing alcohol on the pins usually gets it working just fine. The NES has one of the strongest game libraries of any console in history. Super Mario Bros. 1, 2 and 3, Zelda 1 and 2, Mega Man 1-6, Excitebike, Metroid, Kirby's Adventure, Adventure Island, Duck Hunt, Punch-Out, and I could keep on going. But I don't want this video to be longer than it needs to be. But the NES was also home to many, many terrible games, whether they be licensed or unlicensed. And actually, I'm going to go over the top 5 best and worst NES games, in my opinion. Number 5 best, Castlevania. Amazing, iconic, extremely difficult side-scroller. Gotta love this one. Number 5 worst, Bible Adventures. Hilariously bad game. Run and jump through 3 thrilling games. Noah's Ark, Baby Moses, and David and Goliath. All these games are so boring yet amazing at the same time. Number 4 best, Metroid. While not as good as what came afterwards, Metroid still offered an amazing action-filled, maze-like adventure. Such a great game. Number 4 worst, Where's Waldo? Just look at this nightmare. Everyone knows about the famous children's books of the same name, but it doesn't work too well as an NES game. I mean, how am I meant to find Waldo when he's just 2 fucking red pixels in a sea of other garbled pixels? Number 3 best, The Legend of Zelda. I mean, it's Zelda, enough said really. I think this game hasn't aged all that well when compared to A Link to the Past, but at the end of the day, it's still Zelda and it's still amazing. Number 3 worst, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Most people know about this one, just an unfun, hard to play, unfair mess of a game. Made by LGN, a company which really deserves its own video at some point. Truly a tragedy. Number 2 best, Super Mario Bros. 3. Wow. This game's a masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. If you've watched my video on the Mario trilogy, then you know just how much I love this game. Number 2 worst, Winter Games. I mean, fuck, what is there to say really? Watching the footage, it might not seem that bad, but trust me, if you've played this abomination, then you know why I hate it. I've never played a game with more overly difficult and unresponsive controls, not to mention that even if you did somehow manage to play it perfectly, the game is still just really boring. Number 1 best, Punch-Out. I don't know why this was my favourite NES game, but I just love it. It's hard, but learning how to take down each fighter perfectly, chaining together a perfect string of punches, it never gets old. Number 1 worst, Action 52. I cannot put into words just how obscene this is. This thing is... it really needs its own video to truly show you just how horrendous it really is. But the main gist of it is, it's 52 poorly designed, nearly unplayable, glitch-filled nightmares that are all just as unfun to play as the last. Well, I think that's gonna do it for today. I hope you all enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you all again later. Bye bye.